So Douglas Lima versus Rory MacDonald 2 just wrapped up in the main event of Bellator 232 this weekend. It was a dominant victory for Douglas Lima. He's an absolute savage. A long time ago, some of you may not remember this, but if you look it up on my channel, welterweight Bellator Grand Prix predictions. I predicted they'd meet each other in the final. I also predicted that Douglas Lima would win overall in the whole entire Grand Prix. I just think he's the beast. I think he's an absolute savage. He's one of the only guys outside the UFC that I think could really compete in the top 5 of the welterweight division inside the UFC. I really believe that. And I believed it the entire time. I knew he was going to beat MVP. I knew he was going to beat Rory MacDonald. And here's the difference between him and Rory MacDonald. Do you think there's any doubt in Lima's mind? Rory MacDonald is on a downslope of his career right now. Douglas Lima's coming into his prime. He's coming into the big moment of his career where he's going to set up his legacy at Bellator. He just won the tournament. This is the start of his reign. Rory MacDonald, I saw him on a bit of a downward spiral. They gifted him the decision over John Fitch. He got into the finals against Douglas Lima. Here's the thing. Is there any doubt in Douglas Lima's mind? There is in Rory MacDonald's. When you watch Douglas Lima fight, do you think that Douglas Lima is thinking to himself, oh, what would God think about this? No. That's in Rory MacDonald's mind. Oh, or do you think Jesus is okay with me taking this guy's back? No. There's none of that in Douglas Lima's mind. That's only in Rory MacDonald's. You can't have that mentality. Douglas Lima's a savage. He was going out there to die. And he ended up killing. He destroyed it for 5 rounds. Completely dominated Rory MacDonald, who is the same guy who beat Tyron Woodley. Guys like this in the UFC. Took Wonderboy Thompson to a close decision. Wonderboy won, but you know, Rory MacDonald's still one of these guys that has great performances in the UFC. His wins still live on in the UFC because he's that good. Goes over to Bellator. Douglas Lima deals with him. I think Douglas Lima, and let's talk about the fight first of all. Douglas Lima went out there and dominated Rory MacDonald. Start to finish. The first fight that happened, the only reason that Rory won was because he was able to get top position and he's able to just settle there. You know, get on top, settle, make Douglas Lima work from on bottom and just reclaim top position and keep it there for the rest of the round. That's what Rory MacDonald wanted to do here. Then you look at what Douglas Lima did in this fight, which was completely different. So much more urgency not to be taken down. So much more urgency. The scrambles were quicker. Everything was done with an urgency that I can't be put on my back. I need to get back up right now. I can't let him put me down. Got out of the single leg attempts. Even at one point, Rory went to take him down and Douglas just shook him off and reversed it. And he ended up on top, doing some damage. It was just a dominant performance start to finish. On the feet, chopping away at the leg kicks, pumping a stiff jab in Rory MacDonald's face. Just a dominant win from Douglas Lima. And tell me if I said this to you. If Douglas Lima and RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, were scheduled to fight each other in the UFC welterweight division, would you be surprised if Douglas Lima was the heavy favourite? Because I wouldn't. I think he'd beat RDA. Change my mind, okay? I reckon there's a lot of guys in the division, don't get me wrong, like your Colby Covingtons, your Kamaru Usmans, that the wrestling would give him some dangers and some troubles. However, there's also a couple guys in that top 5 that I think Douglas Lima could win. I even like his chances against Woodley a little bit. It's a little bit tougher than RDA, but against RDA, I could see him destroying RDA for 5 rounds, even finishing RDA, the way RDA's looked recently. I wouldn't mind seeing him versus Leon Edwards. I think that would be a close fight. I don't know who that would go to. These are top 5, top 6 guys in the UFC. Douglas Lima, in my opinion, is the only guy outside the UFC that can really compete in the top of the divisions. Other than maybe Ryan Bader at light heavyweight. But that's the only guy, you know? Ryan Bader at light heavyweight and then Douglas Lima, of course, at welterweight. These are the only 2 guys in my mind that I can see really competing at the highest levels in the rest of the divisions. And I'm talking top 5. I'm not talking, can they make it to rankings? Because there's a lot of guys that could probably make it to the top 15 in the UFC. I'm talking top 5, title contention. Douglas Lima is really one of the only guys out there. He's a beast. And that's why I picked him to win the whole tournament. Because he's a savage. And what happens next for him? I don't know. There's not much going on at Bellator. Sign to the UFC, please. Please. Please just sign. Just sign to the UFC. Fuck it. I know you're getting paid big bucks from Bellator. You just made $1 million. Now it's legacy, Douglas Lima. You proved you're the best guy at Bellator. In the whole entire roster, you're the best guy at Bellator. come improve your legacy at the UFC. You're just got set for life with that money you just got from the Grand Prix final. Come and make your money in the UFC. They'll beat your contract. I guarantee you, Douglas Lima coming over to the UFC would be big fucking hype. That would be big hype. I'd love to watch it. Douglas Lima versus Leon Edwards makes sense. Douglas Lima versus Dos Anjos makes sense. They both need opponents. Jesus, sign me up for any of that shit, man. Because what's left for him at Bellator? The winner of Paul Daly versus whoever the fuck he's facing. Eric Silva. Post-USADA. Okay then, that's not very interesting. The winner of MVP versus his next tin can. Okay, the only thing I can see happening at Bellator to make an interest in a Douglas Lima fight would be the winner of MVP versus his opponent. Hopefully, if MVP beats his opponent, and if Paul Daly beats his opponent, which he did last night, I completely forgot he was on the card as well. And that Paul Daly versus MVP 2, the rematch. Winner faces off against Douglas Lima. It's a rematch for MVP's case. I'm pretty sure he's fought Paul. I'm not sure what the history of him and Paul Daly is. That's a great fight. The winner of MVP versus Paul Daly 2 takes on Douglas Lima. But other than that, he's beat Korshkov. He destroyed Neiman Gracie. There's not much interest over there. He just destroys everyone. He's already destroyed MVP. I don't see the massive interest, if I'm honest with you guys. The only time I can see any kind of interest would be a rematch between MVP and Paul Daly. The winner of that takes on Douglas Lima. Get him in the UFC. Get him. I want him in the UFC. I want to see the next fight night in Brazil. That isn't this year. The next fight night in Brazil next year. I want to see Douglas Lima versus RDA on the main card, main event. Big fucking news. Douglas Lima RDA in the co-main event. Damian Maia versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. In the third fight down, a Sunsao versus Pedro Munoz. That's a good card already. I don't need to keep going. That's already a card. In the fourth fight down, Glover Teixeira versus... If Jacare loses to Blachowicz. Teixeira versus Jacare... No, wait. Yeah, he's in light heavyweight now. Glover Teixeira versus Jacare Souza. I'm talking an all-Brazilian showdown with Douglas Lima versus Rafael Dos Anjos at the top of the bill. Sign me up. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. The MMA Guru strikes again. Douglas Lima's a beast. Click that button there. Goodbye.